started. And Shreyansi, when you're looking at it in terms of the US markets, mixed close is what we could say coming in. Dow Jones, bit of a decline, but other than that, Nasdaq, S&P 500 managing to hold on to some bit of a gain.
Absolutely, that just about sums it up. But let's also take a look at the price action that we saw coming in for the US markets. Now, when you take a look at US stock futures, though, you're looking at not much of a change coming in, be it an S&P 500, Nasdaq. They closed at fresh record highs, but then when you take a look at the futures movement coming in, for Dow Jones, it was about 0.1% uptick coming in, S&P 500 as well as Nasdaq, similar moves coming in on the futures basis. But let's take a look at the regular day trading session then, and when you take a look at the S&P 500 as well as Nasdaq composite, they both closed Monday's trading session at all-time highs, like I mentioned, each rising slightly as investors awaited key inflation data as well as earnings results due out later this week as well. So when you take a look at the broad market index, that closed with an uptick of about 0.1% thereabout, and when you take a look at tech-heavy Nasdaq as well, you're looking at gains coming in of about 0.3% thereabout. Now, Dow Jones was the one that was a laggard, like Winnie mentioned. So you saw like about a 0.1% uptick coming in for Dow Jones as well. And the S&P 500 continues its advance as easing pricing pressures as well as slowing growth have investors increasingly optimistic that the Federal Reserve will soon start to ease up on monetary policy. But others who are concerned a correction is on the horizon are urging investors to broaden their exposure. So that's largely the market setup at this point. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell will testify this week before Congress as part of a semi-annual update on monetary policy, and Powell will be speaking first to the Senate Banking Committee on Tuesday, followed by an appearance Wednesday before the House Financial Services Committee as well. Now, there's key inflation data that is on the deck, that is due out later this week, with the June Consumer Price Index on Thursday, as well as the Producer Price Index on Friday. And on the earnings front, you also have PepsiCo as well as Delta Airlines that are set to post their results on Thursday. So quite some events to keep an eye on this week, and bank earnings results from Citigroup as well as JP Morgan Chase are also due out, capping off a volatile trading day as investors reacted to a surprise win for the left in the country's parliamentary election. More on that election later, but the CAC 40 also provisionally closed down lower. So that largely is the update coming in, Vinny, as far as global markets as well as Europe is concerned. But tell us about oil then.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at oil prices this morning and how they've opened up, quite subdued in trade, down 0.1% is what Brent crude oil is doing. $85 per barrel mark is what Brent crude oil is trading at, while WTI crude oil at $82 per barrel mark. Now, what is the reason that we're keeping, that bit of a subduedness that you're seeing for the oil prices? Is obviously the hurricane that's there in Texas. That's a worry coming in because that could hit the US demand, as well as in terms of Gaza peace talks. That is what everyone is keeping an eye out on. Now, obviously, mainly because of the hurricane which is there in Texas side, and maybe it could hit those Texas oil infrastructure. A bit of a worry in terms of demand, supply, all that surely becomes a concern. So everyone's keeping an eye out on that as well. And obviously Middle East tensions and how that is shaping up in terms of peace talks is a key factor to watch out for. Moving on to gold prices, where gold is headed. Now, gold overnight saw a bit of a drop, but this morning has opened up with some bit of a gain of 0.3% in trade. Gold trading at $2,369 per ounce mark as of now. Silver also chopped up in trade, managing to hold on to gains of almost 0.7% this morning. So yes, that's how the commodities are shaping up. Gold surely seeing an uptick. Brent crude oil a bit subdued in trade this morning.
Well, absolutely, and the Hurricane Beryl has there are 2.6 million people in Texas that are out of power at this point because of this hurricane. So definitely a key event to watch out for in terms of updates. Now, in terms of other events that you should be keeping an eye on, monthly MF flows are something that you should be keeping an eye on. And additionally, in terms of global cues, you do have US consumer credit data. And in terms of Q1 earnings, then there's a host of counters to keep an eye on. So the likes of HFCL, Delta Corp, Shalby, GM Breweries as well. And on account of corporate action, specifically AGMs, you do have counters like JSW Steel, JK Cement, Persistent Systems, Central Bank of India and Jyoti Structures that will be in focus on account of all of that. Now, Kalpataru Projects is also mulling fundraise, so that counter will be in the spotlight, and so will KDDL because there's a share buyback that is on the cards there as well. In infra, InvIT also has a trust distribution and it's the last day to buy a host of counters to be eligible for dividends, so the likes of DCM Shriram, Deep Industries, Polycab India and JK Cement as well as Persistent Systems should be on your radar on account of all of that. Now the lock-in period also ends for SAR Polymers, so that one will also be in focus. And in terms of other events, there's a host of events that we're keeping on our radar. So Rahul Gandhi is visiting Rai Bareli. On the political front, that is in focus, and Fed Chair Jerome Powell, like I told you, will be speaking to FOMC member Michelle Bowman to speak. And also, you also have Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech, like I mentioned, and is scheduled today as well as tomorrow. That will be in focus, and Michelle Bowman's speech as well, since they're an FOMC member, as well as US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's speech as well. That will be in focus, Vinny.
Absolutely key events, and also let's not forget, PM Modi's the 2-day visit continues in Russia. So, more updates just on that front on what is happening. He'll be visiting Austria as well. So, what is the path going forward? Any new word coming in there is something we are watching out for. Let's move on. And the street has also keenly been watching the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's testimony before Congress today amid the elevated interest rates and banking concerns. Some senators like Elizabeth Warren have been pushing for rate cuts as cost of living soars. Now, Jerome Powell is likely to tell lawmakers that Federal Reserve officials need further confirmation that inflation is slowing before they are in a position to cut rates, even with the evidence of a building of a softer growth and employment.
Moving on then, there seems to be no stopping the AI rally. The biggest chip maker in the world, TSMC, which has over 50% market share, hit a $1 trillion market value after analysts boosted projections. Now, the chip maker's shares surged nearly 5%, reflecting its key role as a supplier for Apple and Nvidia. Meanwhile, Corning shares jumped 12% as well after raising its second quarter guidance, citing strong demand for its optical connectivity products used in AI networks as well.
And Paramount has agreed to merge with Skydance, ending months of negotiation. The deal involves an $8 billion investment from private equity firms and a $1.5 billion capital injection into Paramount, with Skydance founder leading the new company. However, regulatory approvals are pending, even as the management expects to close the merger by third quarter of 2025.
Moving on then, President Joe Biden vowed to continue his re-election campaign despite concerns from some Democrats. The 81-year-old candidate challenged doubters to contest him at the Democratic National Convention. He also reassured donors and stated, "I am not going anywhere." And those were his exact words. This comes after a shaky debate performance against Donald Trump, prompting some Democrats to call US President Biden to step aside. However, a key strategist said that there is a 40% chance that Biden would not seek re-election.
And violent clashes have erupted on the streets of France after a shocking win for the left-wing coalition blocked the far right from taking power in the snap elections. Protesters could be seen launching flares, setting e-bikes on fire and clashing with the police as thousands of officers were deployed across France. The electoral outcome has left the country with an alarming possibility of a hung parliament, raising the possibility of a political instability.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.